Pete Odera is one of East Africa's most famous gospel artists. Known by some as the architect or the godfather of contemporary gospel music in the region, he has shared the stage with some of the music industry's biggest stars. But Pete's life wasn't always something to sing about.
I can count the number of people who are young teens with me who died either because they were in an accident because the driver was drunk, or they were out partying somewhere. And so that I'm alive today from that kind of a lifestyle, to me is a miracle. I was born, the second born of 3 children. My dad and mom moved to Nairobi in the 60s, shortly after independence.
Those early years of independence were turbulent times, as 2 main political parties fought for the nation's vote. Pete's father was a political analyst and the editor of a local newspaper, but his loyalties lay with a party in opposition to the president. And when a cabinet minister loyal to that president was assassinated in 1969, there was a clampdown on all in opposition, including Pete Odera's father.
Because of his political views, our family was subjected to all kinds of harassment by the police.
Pete's father was often detained when he was young, sometimes for months on end. This forced his mom to become the breadwinner in the family. In time, they found accommodation living with some relatives, all of whom had a love for music. Around this time, another influence took root in Pete's life. It came in the form of Mrs. Roberts, a missionary from Scotland who came to do some outreach work at Pete's school.
What would happen is she'd tell the story, bring a film or tell the story about Jesus. And I remember being presented with the opportunity to know Jesus Christ. The Lord spoke to me and said to me that I would be a pastor, that I would be ministering to young people. And I really didn't know what that meant.
And with no one to explain that, other voices started to influence his life. With no stable father figure around, Pete soon found his values being dictated by the friends around him.
I think by the time I was 12, I was already going to nightclubs and, spending time dancing and drinking and doing whatever.
While Pete was being introduced into the club scene by people outside his family, he was also exposed to pornography by older members of his family.
So here I was growing up with these secrets.
When Pete was sent to boarding school a few years later, things went from bad to worse. Although he received a good education, he was drawn to the town's nightlife.
But I had started forgetting about the commitment that I made to the Lord. I got into smoking, into, like half a pack a day.
In order to keep up his habit, Pete got into what he calls small-time peddling. While this helped feed his addiction, Pete had another problem. Although he may not have been living like a Christian, he kept up the appearance of one and always made it to church on Sunday mornings.
And this is sort of the dichotomy I lived with, that on Friday and Saturday night I was one person and on Sunday morning I was somebody else.
But Pete knew he was living a lie, a double-sided existence in which his desire for Christ was at war with his life of sin and addiction.
And it created a conflict in me that made me depressed, and sort of angry at myself. And so I lived with this incredible guilt and shame. At that time, I decided that there were some friends who were not helping me live a life that was going to be pleasing to God.
As Pete surrendered to God and developed a desire to read his Bible, he became less concerned with the approval of his peers and more about the things of God. In time, he saw his addiction broken as everything about his life was being transformed.
I can't pinpoint the day, but I do remember that suddenly I started to recognize colors. It's not like I was seeing the world in black and white, but suddenly the weight and the cloud that was in my life just started to lift, and I began to realize the love of God for me.
Pete remembered the word God had spoken to him as a boy, that he would minister to young people. He also felt God calling him back into the club scene, this time as a light, to be used by God and for God.
My rationale was very simple, that if I could take the gospel message and put it into a very modern urban beat, that people would listen to it.
He was given the chance to record his first album, and soon doors for ministry started opening all over the country for him. ministry that involved him playing in some of the biggest churches and the most popular nightclubs.
I believe the Lord just opened a door and raised me up as an icon to speak to our generation, to really say that, He can take up messed up life and said, okay, I'm going to make a message out of your mess.
And through worship, celebration, mentoring and discipleship, Pete's Church Waterbrook, which was started in 2004 in Nairobi, Kenya, aims to do just that.
So the vision that the Lord has given me is to raise a new generation of kingdom-minded believers who will then take transformation to the nations, who will be able to teach the nations how to live, how to be married, how to do entertainment, how to live a glorious life for God, and how to live a productive life that will bring change and transformation from what we've been used to in Africa. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be available.